This is Greta Thunberg as you've never seen her before. At home in her Stockholm flat and in reflective mood. The world's leading climate activist has agreed to her first major interview since lockdown began 3 months ago. She is on the sofa with her dog Roxy.
Come on. Yeah.
I'm in a greenhouse in the middle of beautiful Kew Gardens, wired up to the internet for one of the most in-depth interviews Greta Thunberg has ever given. Greta, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. It's very good to speak to you. Thank you very much for talking to us. First of all, let me ask you a bit about lockdown. Obviously, Sweden's had a different experience than other countries, but what has the coronavirus experience been like for you? What have you been doing with your days?
I'm really the last one to complain because I haven't been that affected by this at all. I've still had lots of things to do. I have been working on many new projects and do things that I previously didn't have time to do. I've taken a sabbatical year from school to be able to travel around. But now I thought I'm just home anyway, so I might as well just join the class.
Listen, there has been an incredible international response to coronavirus, with countries around the world putting their economies in lockdown. Why do you think that climate change doesn't generate the same sense of urgency?
Well, obviously because it's not being treated, it has never been treated as a crisis. It is still seen as this vague, distant topic. And then of course, without perceiving it as a crisis, you won't be able to take measures that are necessary.
Why do you think climate change isn't regarded as a crisis in the same way as the coronavirus? Because arguably, it's much more of a systemic threat than coronavirus.
It's not like it's not affecting people already today. It's not like people are not already dying from it. But it's this kind of crisis that will sneak up on us later if we don't do anything.
But one thing that has come out of the coronavirus crisis has been that politicians have been saying, we have to listen to the scientists. Do you think politicians will now start to listen to scientists on climate change as well?
The main message that underlines everything that we do is listen to the science, listen to the scientists and the experts. And now all of a sudden you hear that everywhere, everyone is saying that. The people in power, the business leaders. It feels like the corona crisis has sort of changed the role of science in our societies, that we are suddenly starting to understand that, oh yeah, we actually have to listen to the experts. That's actually something that we depend on. But it just seems like we listen to the scientists that we can afford to listen to.
Listen, you have met now a whole host of world leaders. How well do they understand the challenge of climate change, do you think?
My experience is that the level of knowledge and understanding, even among people in power, is very, very low, much lower than you would think. I first met Greta Thunberg back in September on the deck of the racing yacht that was about to whisk her across the Atlantic. The then 16-year-old was famous, but nowhere near as famous as she was going to become. I mean, our job is to demand solutions, not to provide solutions.
The voyage was tough going, but for Greta, it was a break, she says, a peaceful time for rest and reflection before she arrived in New York.
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words.
Her speech to the world leaders gathered at the UN for a special climate action summit transformed her from being a well-known activist to a global celebrity.
People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
You made a really incredible speech in New York. Virtually everybody around the world heard your speech. Everybody who heard it, I think, would remember it. You're not normally an angry person. Why did you, and I'm assuming that you did choose to do this, why did you choose to express your anger like that?
Well, I thought that if this isn't a once-in-a-lifetime moment, then I don't know what is. So I really need to use this moment to make out the most of it, so that I won't regret that I said too little or that I held back. So before I chose, like, I'm gonna let my emotions take control and to really make something big out of this, because this I won't be able to do again. But yeah, as you said, I'm really not an angry person.
But it had an incredible effect. I mean, everybody around the world was seeing it on their phones, seeing it on the television. You know, it became an emblem. You, a young girl, standing before the assembled leaders of the world, and it was incredibly powerful. Do you think they heard your key message?
It sure got people talking, but the message that needs to come out is not the emotional message. I understand that it's also very important for people to identify and become emotional, and that makes people act. But right now what we really need is to educate people and to tell the science. Everything people remember from that speech was, "How dare you, you have stolen my childhood." Those are like the only sentences people remember, but if you actually read the speech in full, that is not what the speech was about at all. Because the most important thing was that we will not allow you to continue to see our future as some kind of game, statistic game. So we demand that you go for the budget, which gives us the best possible odds.
Greta Thunberg describes how world leaders lined up to meet her, to shake hands and get that obligatory photo. I think you said, you know, Angela Merkel was queuing up and asking for a selfie with you. Did that happen?
To be fair, it was not only her, it was many. And those kinds of things happen all the time. People just want to stand next to me and other climate activists. They can post it on social media and it makes them look good. It makes it seem like they care.
Do you feel like sometimes you're being used?
Yeah, people definitely see me sometimes as someone to stand next to look good. And that is something I really dislike, because that's not the kind of person I want to be.
Mr. President, good morning.
There was one particularly striking moment when President Donald Trump, who'd said he was not going to attend the meeting, arrived at the UN. The camera caught Greta Thunberg's expression when she saw him. Tell me what you were thinking at that moment.
I just thought that, oh God, this is so absurd. What have I gotten myself into? Why am I standing in here? The whole situation, that whole day, this whole year, was just so absurd.
Greta Thunberg used her year off to travel around North America with her father Svante. She attended climate rallies and observed her school strike every Friday, travelling in an electric car borrowed from, wait for it, Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was, she says, a classic road trip. You saw aspects of American lifestyles as you drove through America. You talk about their kind of refineries, the parking lots full of cars, the kind of gas stations, the people with boats outside their houses, that kind of thing. What did that tell you about the kind of scale of the challenge that we face, those aspects of American lifestyles?
Well, I mean, of course, it's not just American lifestyles. This is, of course, happening all over the world, but it feels like this really tells the story of how the world looks like today, because this is such a clear example. It really shows the fact that there are absolutely no signs of any transition whatsoever. It just shows the scale of changes that we are facing.
I mean, to what extent do you think the response to the coronavirus, this huge response we've seen by governments with huge amounts of money, and the way that politicians are talking about now, needing to do economic stimulus to kickstart their economies again, and isn't that exactly the kind of change that you would want to see?
Just the fact that we seem to think that the climate crisis can be solved by only adopting a green stimulus plan or a green recovery plan tells you everything you need to know about the general lack of awareness that exists today.
But a green stimulus plan allows us the opportunity to begin to decarbonise our economies, change the infrastructure from, polluting coal-fired plants to wind turbines. That's the kind of transition they're talking about. That has to be good for the climate if they fulfil their promises, doesn't it?
I'm not saying it's bad for the climate. We need to do everything we can, all the green investments that we can, but we shouldn't talk about it as this is what we need, this will be enough. Because as long as we continue to pretend that the changes required are possible and available within today's society, we cannot solve the climate crisis within today's political system. If companies, governments, states, institutions were to fulfill all the contracts, business agreements and deals that they have committed themselves to, then we don't stand a chance of achieving the Paris Agreement. So in order to avoid a climate catastrophe, we have to make it possible to abandon valid deals and contracts. And that is not possible within today's political system. I don't say as an opinion, that is a fact. So if we are going to achieve these goals, that is literally not possible within today's societies.
Greta Thunberg has been following the Black Lives Matter protests as they've swept across America and the world following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis at the end of May. The protests really resonated with her after what she'd seen on her road trip. What is the link between, the climate emergency and Black Lives Matter, do you think, in terms of the way people respond to the issue?
Not just Black Lives Matter and the climate movement, but in all movements where the goal is justice, whether it is climate justice, social justice, racial justice, or gender equality, whatever it is always the fight for justice. And it feels like we have passed some kind of social tipping point where people are starting to realize that we cannot keep looking away from these things. We cannot keep sweeping these things under the carpet, these injustices. So I think that people are starting to wake up. We can see an awakening in the last couple of years where people are starting to realize that we cannot ignore this, but also to find their own voice, to sort of understand that they can actually have an impact as just one person, to see their role in democracy. I think we are seeing that more and more, and that is very hopeful.
And what would you say to young people who are concerned about Black Lives Matter and are concerned about the climate? What would your advice be to them if they want to see change in the world?
I mean, we have seen previous and older generations fail, frankly, in so many different ways, and that our current system isn't sustainable. We need to take on the role as adults, it feels like, because it doesn't seem like the adults today and the older generations are willing or realizing that we actually need to make these changes. And honestly, I think more and more young people are starting to realize that this is more and more becoming up to us, because we see everyone else just being silent and failing on this. So we need to step up, and we need to do it now.
Greta is doing this interview because she's made a deeply personal radio programme for Swedish radio about her life and her campaigning. She talks about the compulsion she feels to campaign on the climate issue.
My message is, and has always been, listen to the science, listen to the scientists.
Can I ask you, this is quite a personal question. To what extent do you think your autism has enabled you to be the champion of this issue that you are?
I think very much, because, I mean, simply it makes me different from the rest. It makes me see the world in a different view. And if I do something, if I'm committed to something, I go all in. Many people seem to be able to see the climate crisis and say like, yeah, it's really important, and then just go on with their everyday lives. And I cannot do that. I tried to join organizations and to become active, like in different movements. I was thinking about things I could do to change things. But honestly, that didn't work because I just hated making small talk and constantly being around so many people, socializing. So then I decided, well, I might just do something myself then. And then I decided to school strike, and that I did myself. That is also one of the reasons to why I'm so open about my autism, because many people with autism are seen as like they are weak and autism is a weakness, but it doesn't have to be. Under the wrong circumstances, it can add a lot of stress and lots of difficulties, but under the right circumstances, it can actually be a gift. It doesn't have to be a burden. It can also be a superpower.
This is the defining image of Greta Thunberg, a teenager protesting alone outside the Swedish parliament.
I have so many people reach out to me and say, I have autism as well, and thank you for killing stereotypes, and that makes me very, very happy.
It's really interesting talking to you, because when I met you in Plymouth, you weren't interested. I sort of said hello and I was trying to be all friendly, and you weren't interested at all. And then when I sat down and spoke to you, you are so engaging and so focused, and you have such a strong sense of what you want to say. I actually find it very, very easy to talk to you.
Well, thank you, I guess. But yeah, I'm very committed and very, very stubborn. Before I started school striking, I told my parents and I told some others, and no one thought I was actually gonna do it. But I did it, and then I was on a mission, and I haven't stopped since then. I know what I want to do, and I know what I need to do. So yeah, that's just what I'm doing.
You are like a truly international figure. You're kind of like an emblem for this challenge. Yet it doesn't seem, you don't seem to bear it as a heavy burden. You know, do you think that's again partly linked into your autism, that you can kind of disassociate the fame and the kind of celebrity from your key message, and you just say, this is about the message, it's not about me?
Lots of attention falls on me, and of course with that comes a big responsibility. But I don't see it as a burden, because I know that if I were to decide today that I don't want to do this anymore, I could just quit. I mean, I'm in this because I want to. And that's not because I think it's fun. That's not because I enjoy the attention. It's because I want to make a difference. And it makes me happy to know that I can make a difference. Honestly, I feel I don't like this attention. To the contrary, actually. If I were to choose, I would just be like everyone else and continue studying, because that's what I enjoy doing the most. But since this is such an extraordinary situation, we have to do things that we might not always find very comfortable.
Just before the coronavirus pandemic struck, Greta spoke at Davos, the meeting of global business and political leaders high in the Swiss Alps.
Our house is still on fire. Your inaction is fueling the flames by the hour. And we are telling you to act as if you loved your children above all else. Thank you.
Isn't there a danger that people would listen to you and say, well, all hope is lost, I may as well continue my lifestyle because there's nothing I can do to make the kind of changes on the kind of scale that Greta Thunberg says is necessary?
There is no point where everything is beyond saving, because, I mean, there are degrees of how bad it can get. No matter where we are, no matter how dark the situation may look like, we must never allow ourselves to give up, because we can always prevent it from getting worse. And that is what we need to be doing. And the situation, it is not dark. There is hope. We can change, and these changes doesn't have to be a bad thing.
I mean, in a sense, doesn't coronavirus provide us with hope about the ability of people to change? Because so many people around the world have changed their lifestyles. They've stopped flying, they're driving around less.
If anything, it will change the way we perceive and treat crises, because it shows that during a crisis you act with necessary force. And it's also opened up the discussion and the debate around how much we value a human life. For example, people say they are ready to sacrifice the economy. They are saying we will do whatever it takes because we cannot put a price on a human life. If you use that logic for the climate, for instance, then that opens up many possibilities, that argument, and it changes the discussion and the debate.
Okay, two more questions for you, one of which is about the way that you get attacked on social media. I mean, it's an extraordinary position for a young Swedish child to find themselves being ridiculed by the President of the United States. How do you deal with that?
People don't want to hear me talk about this, and people won't be able to handle this, so they're going to try to silence me, and some people know no limits. So unfortunately, that is something you have to accept. I'm not scared about my personal safety, because I know that these people hide behind computer screens. And honestly, it's a bit fun to see these people become so upset and become so freaked out just because a child is speaking and telling the truth.
But the kind of threats you've had have been quite extraordinary. I mean, you've had death threats, not just for you, but your family. I mean, that must be hard to handle.
It's hard when your family and especially my little sister gets targeted of these kinds of things. That is very hard. It doesn't affect me when people like attack me, but when they go after my family or friends, that is another thing. When you receive those kinds of hate and threats and mockery, conspiracy theories, whatever it is, that is also a sign that you are making a difference, and that people are actually trying to silence you for a reason, and that reason is because you are too loud. And if you are loud, that means you are having a difference. You are having an impact.
In a few weeks' time, the 17-year-old climate activist will be back at school. She says it won't stop her campaigning on climate, though she recognises keeping up her activism will be difficult.
I am really hoping to be able to study, because I love studying, and also, of course, at the same time do whatever I can and continue activism. But yeah, it won't be possible within the nearest future to travel anywhere. But yeah, so you just have to take it day by day, week by week, see how the world develops, how the situation develops, and what you can do during those circumstances. You have to adapt.
Campaigners like Greta Thunberg see the coming year as crucial for global action on climate in the wake of the coronavirus crisis. Will the recovery plans many nations are proposing make serious efforts to decarbonise their economies? How ambitious will the delayed UN climate conference be? These are issues Greta Thunberg wants to influence, but of course, now she will be juggling her commitment to the climate with her schoolwork.